This week we mark the end of one long book, full of extreme highs and devastating lows, and set out into a new one. I'm not just speaking about the end of 2020 and the beginning of 2021. This week's Torah reading includes the final verses in the book of Genesis, and we look forward now to beginning a new book, Exodus, next week. Interestingly, we were in the book of Exodus way back when the pandemic began. We practically read the entire Torah in quarantine, completing one full cycle, or perhaps spiral is a better metaphor, as our sacred sources, more like life, tend not to resolve as neatly as we expect of other works of art and literature. We don't expect a sculpture to be incomplete, a poem to break off halfway, a novel to end in the middle. But that is the way of much of the biblical writings, and certainly how the book of Genesis concludes with Parashat Vayechi. This week's Torah portion, Vayechi, where he lived, refers to our patriarch Jacob's living in Egypt at the time of his death. The portion opens with Jacob lying on his deathbed. Torah tells us that moments before he dies, Jacob summons his favorite son Joseph to tell Joseph his wishes for his burial. "Please do not bury me in Egypt," Jacob pleads. And Joseph promises to bury Jacob in their family's burial place, outside of Mizraim. Understanding his father's death was imminent, Joseph hurried to bring his own sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, to be with their grandfather Jacob in his final moments of life. So moved that he was given this gift to be with his grandsons before he dies, Jacob offers Ephraim and Manasseh a blessing. Those familiar with the book of Genesis will surely recognize the blessing that Jacob offers, as it's similar to the blessings bestowed upon their ancestors before them, that of progeny and land. Generation after generation, our patriarchs wished each other children and grandchildren as numerous as the stars in the sky and sand on the beach, children who could serve as guarantors of tradition, preserving the faith into the future. They also wished each other land. For our agrarian ancestors, land represented livelihood. For those who wandered the wilderness, land was refuge. And those who knew the bitterness of bondage and exile, land meant freedom to live in a home of their own. That was their hope for each other, that each subsequent generation would be closer to enjoying the ultimate freedom, appreciating the blessings of family and home. The way we come to bless future generations is by passing along the covenant through our actions, continuing to do the work here on earth that God asks of us, building a better world for our children and those yet to inherit the blessing. Rabbi Jonathan Sacks, who sadly died this past year, taught that Judaism is unique, as Jews live in what he called covenantal time, the story of the human journey in response to the divine call, with all its backslidings and false turns, its regression and failures, yet never doomed to tragic fate. Always with the possibility of repentance and return, always sustained by the vision with which the story began, the promised land, the place where justice and compassion triumph over the evil that lurks, where human virtue and divine blessedness meet in the consummation of the covenant that we call redemption. As another author puts it, the unappeased memory of a future still to be fulfilled. As the people of Israel, descendants of Jacob and inheritors of the covenant, we too must continue to work to achieve that dream of a better world for our families and all the families of the earth. As we begin this new year, 2021, let's recommit ourselves again to the covenant God first established with our biblical ancestors so long ago. We are the proof that Jacob's story didn't end with his death or the conclusion of Genesis, but his legacy and the blessings he bestowed on his own children and generations of our people live on with us. And there is much work we still must do to realize Jacob's hopes for our people, for our world. While last night's ball drop in Times Square marked the end of 2020, a year of sadness and pain for so many of us, New Year's Eve 2021 does not absolve us of the problems, the illness, the death, division, and injustices of the past year. There is still so much work to do on all fronts. What the new year does allow for us, though, is for each of us as individuals and a collective to stop, to breathe, take account of where we are and make resolutions for the coming year. That work begins with us. A moment, of course, to put on our own oxygen masks before turning to help others. If your social media feeds look anything like mine, you've also seen the 21 tips for a positive new year and similar. Here are 3 of my own, having to do with gratitude, praise, and action. This year, let us give thanks. Even in the most distressing times, we must notice our abounding blessings. In so doing, bring ourselves back in gratitude for the present and back in touch with the full reality of our lives. The good and the bad, the ordered and the messy. This year, let us praise. Praise to God, the God of our ancestors, who has remained with us all these years, appearing to us every step of the way, both at life's highest heights and most devastating lows. And let us not forget to praise others too. Most people, most of the time, are unappreciated. Being recognized, thanked, and congratulated by someone else is one of the most empowering things that can happen to us. This year, let us live our values. As a synagogue community, we will continue to strive to bridge the many divides that separate our families, our friend groups, and the larger community, modeling civil discourse, and striving to find common ground for us to come together for the sake of the good and the holy. This new year, we will also continue to strengthen relationships between and among us. And of course, we will remain committed to Tikkun Olam, engaging in both hands-on volunteering and finding other impactful opportunities to donate both cash and in-kind collections to benefit others around Chicagoland, in Israel, and beyond. And so this week we come to the end of the book of Genesis, the last of the tales of Sarah, Rebekah, Rachel, and Leah, of Abraham, of Isaac, and Jacob. Yet the story of the covenant our ancestors forged with God and passed generation to generation is not complete. The last chapter is not yet written. The dream has not yet been realized. As we step into the secular new year, let us bring inspiration from our tradition and an understanding of the realities of our world today, and resolve to continue the work that must still be performed. For we are both the inheritors of the blessing of Jacob, the authors of our people's next chapter, and responsible to continue to partner with God and each other to further our people's story, moving humanity ever closer to a promised land. Shabbat Shalom.